Welcome, everybody, to Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, brought to you by Westwards Consulting and the Kenosha County Substance Use Disorder Coalition. I'm Mike McGowan. We all want to be the best we can be, and many times we're seduced by shortcuts. Go to the local convenience store and you can see rows upon rows of energy drinks. Check out behind the counter and you'll see rows upon rows of products with nicotine and who knows what else is in them. Online, we can order supplements, but do we really know what's even in them? You are what you eat is more than just an old adage. We're going to talk about what we put into our body, how we can literally be the best we can be with our guest today, Sean Casey. Sean Casey is a registered dietitian and physical preparation coach who works with everyone from weekend warriors, that would be me, looking to live healthier, to middle and high school athletes, college athletes, and elite professionals, including an Olympic gold medalist. His expertise is sought out on the international level, where he has traveled to 15 countries, helping clients reach their athletic potential. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, well, thank you for having me on today. It's an absolute pleasure, Mike.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me. I've really been looking forward to this. When I first contacted you, Sean, for the podcast, you were in Singapore. That's not your base of operations. What were you doing there?
So I was working with a client in Singapore. He specifically played badminton himself, and he wanted to kind of really fine tune, hone things in, before he goes into his main stretch with, tournaments, things of that nature. So, but it was a great experience. I was there for about 3 weeks. Singapore is so cool. I always encourage people, if you have a chance to travel, travel because you learn so much about the culture, the people along the way. And the one unique thing about Singapore, it's known as the Garden City. So you have millions of people live there, but their founders were, gardens and beautiful. I've never seen so much green in a major city in my life. I can give you a couple examples is, when you're like driving down the road, in a city and you see like the median, you have maybe a metal sidebar like separating or something. Well, they've planted shrubs, so you still have those separators, but you don't see them at all. It's all green across. And even too, if you have like going over, let's say if there's a bridge or something that's over crossing a road, it's like they have like vines or whatever that are kind of growing on it. So like, and you have massive trees just lining the entire city. Like it's very, very cool the setup. And it almost kind of segues a little bit into our conversation today on, things you can do to support mental health and wellness, other things beyond there. And it just blew my mind the impact of just seeing nature all around you, despite being in a big city like that.
I love that idea. I've often wondered when I drive down the freeway or any place why they don't do that, because it would
Mm.
certainly be more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
And for those
It,
of you listening, little known fact, as long as you brought it up, I believe I'm right, and you can Google it if you'd like to, but the badminton shuttlecock is the fastest moving object in all of
it's
sports.
it's wild when they're doing the overhand smash, like you'll get 250 miles per hour like off the
Yes.
rack. I mean, it's ridiculous the speed. I mean, it's kind of interesting how I originally got into badminton was
Oh, you
uh
play?
no, no, I'll be honest with you, I have the hand-eye coordination of a 3-year-old. Pathetically bad. I'm good at like the running, the jumping, kind of like the
Yeah.
gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are not my strong suit. And it was really interesting when I first originally got in badminton. It was probably, I think, it would have been 2014. And at that point, I just received a message from an individual who is like, "Hey, my name is," and he's made this public, so I'm comfortable sharing his name. But his name is Victor Axelson, who I worked with for 10 years in total. And he's like, "Hi," and at that time in the world, I don't know if he's in his maybe like ranked in the 30s or something. And he's like, "Hi, I'm Victor Axelson. I live in Denmark. I'm a badminton player. I've been single. Would you be interested in working with me?" And I remember getting that message. I'm like, badminton, like that's, interesting because, here in the US, it's not necessarily a huge sport. And, I'm sure most people in the US and may have a stereotype when they hear badminton, what they think it looks like, kind of like this very soft, easy thing. And, so I started working with him and he, quickly rose into the top 5, 10. He's an exceptionally hard worker. So he's achieved a lot of success in the sport to his credit. But it was interesting. I started watching badminton, and it's crazy athleticism, especially,
Mhm.
in singles, the amount of distance that they covered, the jumps, the this and that. And to give, listeners an idea of like how hard the training is, For a lot of badminton players, if they're not getting in, say, 5,000 calories a day, they won't be able to keep up with the training demands. Like it's very intense training, things of that nature. And I'm like, man, like when you start thinking about 5,000 calories, like that's not a small amount there. So, I mean, it's a very cool sport. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of different sports, and every sport that I work with has its own uniqueness, its own beauty. And I always tell people the uniqueness with badminton is you can do something that is like an all-out powerful smash, as we mentioned, where you have it's flying at 200 plus miles per hour, and then your next shot might be the most delicate shot ever. And the birdie, the shuttlecock is so light, depending on how the wind draft is in the stadium. If there's any sort of draft in the air, the shuttle, instead of landing in bounds, it may land, say, a yard or a meter out of bounds, just based off how people are walking around in the stadium. It's so unique in so many different ways, makes it special.
Well, when you mentioned what his caloric needs were, you can't cookie cutter. This is the sort of stuff you can't get out of just a book. You have to tailor your program and what you're telling people to what it is they're looking for, what it is they do, what it is they look like, what do they hope to accomplish, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's the more that you can do to individualize things to support the performance is huge. And whenever I'm working with someone, be it the weekend warrior, someone who's just looking to live healthier, to at your high level competitors, I always look at what's happening from a food standpoint, what's happening from a movement standpoint, what's sleep looking like, what is overall stress management strategies do they have in place to allow for that performance, to build and be
Okay,
supported.
let's go from there because this is where I first was talking to you a while back
Mhm.
because I get asked these questions too,
Mhm.
especially with young people. Well, what can I take, right? And you just mentioned food, you mentioned sleep, you mentioned rest, you mentioned movement, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we can put into our body that aren't good for us, and some things that are.
hmm
Go.
No, absolutely. One of the number one questions I get is, Sean, what supplements should I be taking?
Hmm.
And And I always tell people it's not like you should only be taking food, or no, you can get everything from supplements. There's a happy blend in between. But I think most people have a false idea of, especially in the athletic world, what taking a given dietary supplement will do for their body. And what I mean by that is a dietary supplement, it may increase performance, but it might only increase performance by 2 or 3%. In the world that I work in, 2 to 3% is a huge difference if that's how you're making your livelihood. For someone who is just, recreational to do this, or myself, for instance, if I increase my performance 2% on a bench press or whatever, it doesn't mean a whole lot. If I'm looking at dietary supplements, I always have what I call my foundationals. And these are ones which ideally we'd be getting from food, but can be really challenging at times. So I do like, a quality multivitamin, vitamin D. We know that most people here in Wisconsin, the northern states, I find are deficient even during the summer months just because they're inside all day. And it's hard to get vitamin D from food. Magnesium is one that, if you look at any sort of studies, roughly about two-thirds of the adult population is deficient in there, or like omega-3s, which can be found in fish oils. And again, you can get all of those in food. And like I said, I always go with a food first approach. But like I said, those are just ones that can be really challenging. So if I am doing any dietary supplement recommendations, usually I start with a core base. What I find is everyone wants to go to the highest leaf on the tree, thinking that's going to be the magic bullet for their support. And what I always tell people, especially pre-workouts, in my world, the energy drinks, the pre-workouts are a very big thing. And I'm like, you know what? If you got 8 hours of sleep, that would give you probably 10x the performance benefit of taking, a shot of, caffeine plus mystery ingredients XYZ.
So rest is really important.
It's absolutely massive, and it impacts so many different aspects of not only physical performance, where there's a bazillion research studies, but just overall health and wellness. And one thing I know that's really big right now, or I shouldn't say just big right now, it's been an issue, but is like ADHD, ADD. We know that that is a really large issue, and for someone who's on those medications, they do have side effects.
Mhm.
It can really suppress your appetite. So if you're trying to exercise a lot, it can be almost counterproductive. And two, and I say this with zero judgment, so I want to preface by saying this is when you're on those, be it Ritalin, Adderall, whatever it is, when you're kind of cycling off that medication, maybe you miss a dose, or maybe you're at the tail end of your dose, that can really impact your mood levels and behavior. And so again, kind of tying this back into sleep, what's really fascinating is if you look at the symptoms of sleep deprivation, they almost align 100% with the same symptoms of ADHD.
Mm.
And so I find a lot of people, by just helping them on the sleep aspect of things, they're either able to A, reduce the dose of their medication, or B, they're able to, some of them have been able to get off their medication. And I want to, throw a disclaimer, make sure you don't just cut anything cold turkey, work with a healthcare practitioner to achieve it. But I've had different people who I've been able to help them reduce the need for the medications just through sleep. I mean, it's pretty wild how impactful sleep is on health, wellness, and performance.
Sean, self-disclosure, about a year and a half ago, I ended up having an allergic reaction to some medication. So I had a bad cough, and the doctor was great. She said, "Oh, it'll go away in about 6 to 7 weeks." I went, "What? What?" I mean, I'd never heard that before. And I'm
Uh,
like, "You must be kidding. I speak for a living."
uh,
And then she said to stay away from bing, 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 caffeine being one of them. And I cut out all of that, drank a ton of water, and I got to tell you, I feel like such a fool. I felt so much better. My
it's
inflammation was better.
mm,
Some of we started this by talking about supplements you can buy. All of these energy supplements, the stuff you can buy. There used to be soda pop was in the front counter.
yeah.
Now I can't even, you know,
Mm.
people will want to
What?
say Red Bull, but there's so many
Oh,
variations. What do they do
there's
to you? What do they do?
it's they, you know, a few different things, and one thing you kind of jarred a memory in mind. So I remember when I was younger, when I was in high school, there was like I went if I was going to get like the caffeine drinks was like, hey, you grabbed a Mountain Dew, which had maybe 75
Yes, right.
milligrams of caffeine. And it's like, whoa, like that's like the high caffeine. Now you can go into these stores and some of these energy drinks have 300 milligrams of caffeine in it. And to put that in perspective, that's like 3.5 cups of coffee. And so, tying this back into health and wellness, we just got done talking about how sleep is so essential for health, wellness, performance. Well, caffeine has a half-life on average of 6 hours, plus or minus a little bit. And what a half-life means is the amount of time it takes for your body to eliminate half of whatever that substance is. So let's go back to this energy drink that, well, let me say it has 200 milligrams, which is standard, like I said, somewhere 300, but let's just even say it has 200 milligrams on it. Let's say if you're an adult, an adolescent, whoever it is, and you have that energy drink at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe before your sport practice or before your shift or your whatever it may be. Well, what that means is if that has 200 milligrams of caffeine in it, that means when you try to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, you still have 100 milligrams of caffeine in your system. That'd be the equivalent of drinking a cup and a half of coffee
Just for
immediately,
bedtime.
yeah, as your bedtime wind down. And so then we know again, so now you're altering your sleep patterns, the depth of your sleep, the quality of your sleep. And as a result, your immune system starts, suffering, your energy levels. It creates this nasty feedback loop where then people are like, oh man, now I'm tired at, you know, 11 o'clock in the morning, so I need to take a cup there. Now they're taking a cup at, and it just creates this nasty system. So I always look at how can we reverse this through life and wellness. And I love the fact that you brought up water. Here's one of the easiest things I tell people that you can apply today and will have profound impacts for you. A lot of individuals who I work with do not drink enough water throughout the day. Or I say water's about liquids. And and most of them are like, and again, going back to caffeine now, is like, oh man, I get to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I just can't concentrate at all. My mind's all over the place. I need to, take a medication, or caffeine, whatever it may be. I find if people drink enough water or fluid such that they have to go to the bathroom every 2 hours, that again, I'm not going to say make promises it's going to eliminate everything, but for a majority of the clients I work with, that significantly impacts their energy levels during the day, where now they don't have to reach for the caffeine. They feel like they're more
Mm.
dialed in. And like I said, the easy rule of thumb is if you're going longer than 2 hours without going to the bathroom, it's a good time to start drinking more water.
And when you go to the bathroom, you shouldn't be able to turn out the lights and read by it, right?
Yeah.
It should be clear.
Yeah, it should be relatively clear on there on anything. The only time where it might be a little bit of a color is if you have a multivitamin with some B vitamins in it, because B
Mm,
vitamins will turn it into like kind of like a neon color. But I always tell people like some people are like, oh yeah, it's it's like a darkish color. I'm like, that's probably not where we need to be at, and
mhm.
it's always kind of interesting too. Now that we're talking about just bathroom habits too. One of the other things that can profoundly impact mood, wellness, things of these natures is your gut health. Your gut, 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. Your gut is directly connected to the brain, what's called the vagal nerve. And they constantly crosstalk all the time. So your gut's being referred to as your second brain now. And a lot of people, I always tell them, I'm like, without getting too graphic here, but I'm like, you should have a bowel movement, once a day. I have clients who might go, 2 days, 3 days before they have their normal thing. And that just tells me they're probably not getting enough fiber in their diet. The fruits and vegetables, again, low-hanging fruit, no pun intended. Actually, that was a pun intended. But, I always tell people if you think about your fist as a serving of fruits and vegetables, I want you to eat whatever number you're at today. I mean, in a perfect world, you're getting 6 to 8 servings a day, but if someone's only eating one serving, it's hard to go from one serving to, 6 or 8. So I always tell people, wherever you're starting at today, just increase 2 servings of fruits or vegetables in a day. And that's, I always like to look back. Success leaves clues, it's the popular saying. And so I always like to look back at clients I've worked with over the years and see what was the most successful for them. And early in my career, I would think it'd be like maybe this very elaborate meal thing I did or this very elaborate protocol or whatever it is. But time and time again, the most successful thing is simply increasing fruits and vegetables in the
Mm.
diet. Like it's just kind of fascinating how that all ties together.
Well, it's funny because I'm older than you, and we went from when I was a kid, you could watch players smoking cigarettes in the dugout at a baseball game, major league players, to now the rumors, and I suppose there's some fact that athletes like LeBron and the rest of them spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their own chefs, nutritionists,
Uh-huh.
just to be able to keep their body where it needs to be to make as much
Yeah.
money as long as possible, right?
No, it is so profound. I think LeBron James is a good example in terms of career longevity, and that's what I have found working with clients as well is, whenever I'm working with a client, be it an athlete or non-athlete, but let's just say I'm working with an athlete. My goal with any athlete that I work with is that 20 years after their athletic career is over, they're able to live the life that they want to live. And what I mean by that is let's say I'm just going to, you make 10 million during a career, whatever it is, insert whatever dollar amount. I'm like, that's great, but I guarantee you, if you're 45 or 50 and you can't bend over to play with your kids, or maybe you're
Hmm.
60 and you can't hold your grandkids because your body's so broken down, I'm like, that's going to make life hard. And so that's what I was think about is what we do today. Yes, I want you, and two, I'm like, I want you to perform at your best today, so that way that allows you to, whatever your earning potential is today to maximize it. So I always look at that thing is what can we do today to make sure that 20 years down the road, someone is able to have their best life.
You mentioned some of the stuff you can add to your bodies, and this goes to something, it parallels what I do for a living. You buy a drug on the street,
Mhm.
you have no idea what's in it.
Yeah.
You buy a supplement online, Sean, they're
Well,
not
yeah.
regulated. Am I right about that?
And the issue with dietary supplements is there's regulations in place, but the FDA is who enforces them. And the FDA is so understaffed right now. Basically, the only time the FDA will step in is if there's some sort of outbreak of, or something is found that's being tainted.
Salmonella or
So,
something.
yeah, it's something wild like there. All of a sudden, hey, there's 8 deaths because somebody took supplement XYZ. That's when they step in. But they don't get everything there. And here's what I can share with you. Full disclosure, I've worked in the supplement industry. I've launched multiple brands in the supplement industry. So I know the both ends of it. And I remember one of the contract manufacturers I work with. So what I will do is like, okay, I need ingredients A, B, C, D in it. And I'll have a contract manufacturer who has all their licensure mass produce it. Apparently, the FDA frowns upon me mixing things in my bathtub, puts them in a glass jar and on a shelf. For some
Really?
reason, that's not allowed. I don't know why, but it's not allowed. But jokes aside, so I'm working with one of the manufacturers I've worked with before. It's a very large one on the East Coast. They very big players in the industry to mass produce the formulas that I work on. And so I was talking with this one. I'm like, how many individuals will third party test their supplements to make sure what's on the label is actually in there? And what this individual said was, Sean, he's like, less than 10% do any sort of third-party testing on them. And I'm like, do you mean to te tell me that 90% of the supplements I see on shelves have never been tested to
Right.
make sure they're accurate? He's like, it's actually worse than that. He's like, how you guys do is probably 5%. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, what most companies do is, let's say if there's 10 ingredients in a formula, they may test ingredients, two of those ingredients, be like, oh, well, if those two are in line, everything else should be in line too. Or they'll say, well, let's test the batch we produce. Maybe they test the batch they produce in, say, January of 2025, but they don't test the batch that's produced in June of 2025. So they don't test every batch. And so that's where people run into issues. And two, you have a lot of issues of supplements that are being spiked. The three main
Mhm.
classes that people have to be extremely, extremely cautious with is one, anything that's like a sexual performance enhancement supplement. If you're getting sexual enhancement performance supplements from your gas station, I guarantee that's a high risk right there. So that is one. The other big one is energy powders, pre-workouts. Those are notorious for being spiked with illegal ingredients just so the effects are, feel larger for the user. And the third category, gosh, don't quote me on this, but I want to say the third category may be anti-aging supplements.
Mhm. That
But
makes sense.
yeah, but that is the thing. And and again, you're buying things online, you don't know where they're coming from, the quality of testing. And I always tell people like if you're going to do it, make sure you're buying it, from a trusted resource, healthcare, whatever it may be, or there. But I'm like, I always tell people again, back to our original point is unless you're deficient in an essential nutrient, be it vitamin D, magnesium, like if you're deficient in those nutrients and you get those levels, you'll feel significantly better. But like all these other like flashbang pow things, like you're really playing with fire based off how the market is, and the effect
Well,
may
and
not be nearly as what you're expecting.
that's really an important message for young people who are all looking because they hear it, right?
Yeah.
And when you see a pro athlete, which happens routinely, get in
Mm.
trouble for a supplement they've been taking, and then they do the mea culpa, right? Oh, I didn't know that this was in it. It's like, well, there's a reason why their governing body
Mm. Yeah.
made certain substances illegal.
Yep.
Because one, they're bad for your health and
Mm.
bad for your body.
Yeah. It's one of the things I always tell people, if you're taking a dietary supplement, especially if you're being tested with them, like make sure that on the label they say informed choice for sport or NSF certified for sport. And that guarantees that they've been tested for all these banned
Really?
substances.
Say that
Yep.
again.
NSF certified for sport
Huh.
or informed choice certified for sport. So any athlete that I'm working with is any supplement that's being recommended, I make sure that they have those on them because it guarantees that they've been tested for these banned substances.
You mentioned what they're looking for in an edge, and I was at a high school baseball game a couple weeks ago. Heard a pitcher who wasn't doing particularly well talking to his teammates, not his coaches, but I'm just part of the fence at that point. Say that he had taken 5 of those Zyn pouches
Ooh,
so that
yeah,
he could boost his pitching performance that day.
yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the pouches are so big. So that's kind of like the new thing right now is taking
Yep.
nicotine to help with focus, concentration, things of that nature. And at the end of the day, that is still going to affect the receptors in your brain. That is, you might get that little boost, but that also can get pretty addictive pretty in a hurry. And I think long term wise, I see that adding a lot of long term wise, I'm concerned about the effect that's going to have on people's brains, especially youth individuals where the brain is still developing so much.
And how much nicotine is good for the body?
Yeah, I want as little as possible in
Right.
in the body.
Five. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you're
it,
right. People don't know this, Sean, but I think folks like you and I do. If I ask people, you go to your local gas station, what's behind the counter? They'll say cigarettes. I'm like, look the next time. Cigarettes were taken over by vaping products, and
yeah,
now all you see are the
mm,
pouches.
yeah.
That's the first row. That's the first row now, and it's all being advertised to young people.
Yeah, and the market is huge. And you're talking about the vapes. Like there was a study that was in the military. And don't quote me on these exact numbers, but they looked at like your traditional testing for people who are vaping versus non-vaping of their recruits. and it was like people who the sit-up scores was significantly lower, the push-up scores were significantly lower, the 2 mile rest time was significantly lower in those who were vaping
I see.
on there. And you got there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I'm like, this is pretty consistent. Like, yeah, you kind of feel the more focus there, but I'm like, long term wise, it can cause issues. And again, going back to the sleep aspect, and the hard thing now is there's so much on TikTok influence that's coming down by influencers who don't have necessarily
Yes.
background for this. And one story that I can share with you, actually, I have two stories I can share with you, but one story was I was working with a high school. This individual's a football player, and he came up to me after hearing me talk. He's like, "Hey, Sean," he's like, "I'm looking to purchase ashwagandha. You know, what do you think about it?" I'm thinking like ashwagandha is kind of known for like relaxation, a little bit sleep stuff. So I'm like, "Oh, are you having sleep issues?" Or he's like, "Oh, not really." I'm like, "Well, what are you taking for?" He's like, "Well, Sean, everyone knows that ashwagandha is going to jack your testosterone levels through the roof." I'm like, what? He's like, oh yeah, it's all over TikTok. And in my mind, it's like if you look at the research, it increases by like a small percentage, which is the equivalent of taking like a cup of water and dumping it into the ocean, expecting to see a water level rise. Like it's insignificant. But like, I was kind of sharing with him. I'm like, I'm thinking in my head too, and I'm talking, the parents and everything. I'm like, if if this individual, if your son who's clearly going through the middle of puberty right now, I'm like, if he has testosterone issues, I'm like, that's a serious medical condition. I guarantee you this root powder is not going to solve it for him. Like, and you hear so many things like there or the other. I can tell you horror stories on individuals who will say the Zen pouches, for instance, or caffeine. We were talking about energy drinks earlier, who they try that for the first time before an important event. They have no idea how their body's going to respond. They've never tried before a practice or whatever it is. And I remember one swimmer in particular, she was expected to, set the state record. She was like Division One caliber swimmer at the collegiate level. And her high school race, like where they thought she was going to win this, she took caffeine for the first time ever before the race. She was the endurance swimmer. The first half of the race, she was absolutely flying. I mean, it was like Olympic pace. It was wild. Second half of the race, she hit the wall, finished
Yeah.
dead last. So her high school career ended where they thought like, hey, this could be a state record before you go off to your Division One career. It ended with a last place finish. Like, and so that's why I always tell people, I'm like, you're, it sounds sexy on the front end side, but like, there's a lot of things you have to consider as you're doing this. And thinking, being going back there is how's this going to affect your brain and what, behaviors could this lead to, especially if you're doing it long term.
And I'm also guessing that as part of your regimen that marijuana is not a performance enhancing drug.
No, 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 no. I have yet to write a plan with supplements for athletes on it where marijuana is high on the list. Again,
Yeah.
that affects brain behavior. I know a lot of individuals who, yeah, I know sometimes it's kind of marketed as, hey, there's no side effects. It's here and there. Anecdotally, I know, it affects different regions of the brain. I know individuals who have done it long period, and if they're being really honest with me, they're like, yeah, I know my memory's not what it should be. And these are individuals who are my age who were doing it, 20 years ago when they were in college and, throughout. And like I said, I can't say everyone, but a fair amount of them have told me like, yeah, my mind just is not as sharp
Yeah.
as what it was. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's
I,
it's definitely playing.
well, there's so much misinformation. Sometimes we just like to convince ourselves. I
Yeah.
had a coach one time tell me when I was much, much younger that just before a game, night before a game, have a couple of beers to relax and hydrate. I'm like, I don't believe alcohol hydrates you. I think it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, it's a dehydration. You're going to be in worse shape for there. And it's interesting you're talking about like drinking, how things have changed. So drinking, before you go into bed, and this is something I see with a lot of people as we're talking about addiction or things. They always think like, hey, I'm gonna have a few drinks to help me unwind at the end of the day. What most people don't realize is alcohol and they're like, oh, I sleep better when I'm drinking, type thing. And I'm like, alcohol is like a sedative. It's like if you're taking anesthesia, it's not like you go into surgery, you have anesthesia, and you wake up like, oh, I feel so refreshed after the anesthesia. It literally knocks you out. And that's the same way that alcohol works. Like it really jacks up your sleep cycles. Like if you look at somebody, if you measure like their sleep cycles for someone who's drinking, and then if you have them drink and go before going to bed, you'll see their sleep is significantly affected. And so that's why I always tell people again, as we're looking for this holistic health and performance on someone's performance journey, I'm like, that is something, again, I'm not saying that alcohol is, everyone can make their own decision there, but I'm like, here are the facts that you need to know as you're making your decisions.
I'll let you wrap this in a bow. If I wanted to be the best I could be, I should.
if you want to be the best that you could be, I'd really focus on increasing food. Again, two easy take-home tips someone can implement right away is drink enough water, so you're going to the bathroom every 2 hours. If you think about your fist of fruits as it being a fruit or vegetable, increase the number you're eating by two per day. So that's on the food side. On the sleep side, one, try to detach from electronics or blue screens there. Actually, the best thing you can do for sleep, this may sound counterintuitive, but get outside for an early morning walk. When you get
Mm.
sunlight in your eyes early in the morning, that it will actually help you sleep a lot deeper at night. So that's an easy take-home thing. And then on a movement standpoint, just try to move throughout the day. Don't do a lot of exercise, say first thing in the morning, and then sit at a computer for the next 15 hours a day, which full disclosure, I'm guilty of doing that at times. But try to get up during the day to move around more.
Sounds great. As you can imagine, those of you who are listening, I've heard Sean talk in front of groups, and he's just terrific. So if you're a high school or a college, and you can just imagine the rapt attention younger people give to him and the questions that they will have for him. So clearly, the links to Sean's contact information is at the bottom of this podcast. Sean, you know so much more than me about so many things. Thanks for your expertise and perspective.
Hey, well, it was
Um,
an absolute pleasure being on. I appreciate the host, and I love the work that you're doing to help people live healthier, active lives.
Oh, thanks. That's really nice. For those of you listening and watching, I hope you find health and wellness wherever you are. As always, thanks for listening. Be safe, take care, and remember, there are no shortcuts.